I once believed that love was a simple equation. Two people sharing one future, a lifetime filled with shared dreams and aspirations. We were that couple. Or at least I thought we were, until reality revealed a different truth. The shift in our relationship wasn't abrupt. It seeped into our lives quietly, like a shadow gradually consuming the light of our love. At first, I attributed the changes to stress. Tom worked in marketing, a demanding field that often left him preoccupied with deadlines, client presentations, and the relentless pressure of unsatisfied customers. I was a graphic designer, working from home. Although our lives seemed to follow different rhythms, they had always found a way to align until they didn't. I vividly recall the first night I truly felt the distance between us. We were lying in bed, and I reached out to him, a familiar gesture that once brought comfort. His warmth was my sanctuary, a source of safety. He would usually pull me close, intertwining our legs, creating a cocoon of intimacy. But this time he instinctively pulled away. Just a slight movement, yet enough to make me acutely aware of the gap forming between us. I tried to laugh it off, teasing him about feeling cold, hoping for a casual excuse. He nodded in response, but his gaze remained fixed on the ceiling, distant and detached. This behavior became a troubling pattern. Nights passed where he would deliberately avoid me without explanation. He even stopped sleeping nude, and even when we found ourselves in the same bed, an invisible barrier seemed to separate us. Physically and emotionally, I felt an unshakable sense that something was deeply wrong, and I could no longer ignore it. One morning, while preparing coffee, I found myself staring at him across the kitchen table. He was absorbed in his phone, completely distracted and seemingly absent from the moment. We used to engage in meaningful conversations over breakfast, sharing our plans for the day, but now it felt as if we inhabited entirely different worlds. When his phone buzzed with a notification, he turned the screen away from me, a subtle yet alarming gesture. Our eyes briefly met, and he offered a weak, distracted smile that didn't reach his eyes. Days turned into weeks, and each small gesture, every glance, every word, felt laden with unspoken tension. I began to question everything about our relationship. Why was he taking longer showers? Why did he avoid showering together, a moment we once cherished for its intimacy? Even when we discussed a trip to the beach, he seemed disinterested. Where once he had delighted in those adventures, relishing the freedom of being naked under the sun, now he shunned the idea altogether. I tried to brush these troubling thoughts aside. Perhaps it was merely work stress, or maybe I was overthinking things. But then one evening, I was scrolling through Facebook and stumbled upon a notification. Tom is now friends with Julia. Julia was my best friend, and their connection struck me as odd. They had never been close. In fact, they rarely spoke when we all hung out. There was no reason for them to suddenly be Facebook friends. My heart sank, a cold wave of fear washing over me as I realized that this felt significant. That night, as we settled on the couch with the television murmuring in the background, I turned to him, trying to keep my voice casual despite the pounding of my heart. "Why did you add Julia on Facebook?" I asked. His response was dismissive, a shrug of indifference. "She sent me a request and I accepted. No big deal." But it felt like a big deal to me. It felt like the unraveling of everything I believed in. Days dragged on, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was hidden from me. I attempted to discuss it with Julia, but her responses were vague and distant. She laughed it off, claiming they just had mutual friends now, urging me not to worry. But I did worry. I felt the walls closing in, as I sensed the two of them drifting into a realm I was not a part of. The nights became colder, and so did Tom. He stopped hugging me in bed and barely kissed me anymore. Even when we were physically together, it felt as though his mind was light years away, consumed by thoughts I could not penetrate. The final straw came one evening when Tom mentioned he was going out for drinks with some colleagues after work. While I had no reason to doubt him, an instinct inside me whispered otherwise. After he left, I decided to check his location on my phone. We had shared our locations with each other for safety reasons, a modern convenience that now felt like a trap. I watched in disbelief as his location pinged far from any bar he had mentioned. Anxiety gripped me as I awaited his return, heart racing with dread. When he finally walked through the door later that night, I asked about his evening. He recounted stories about the bar and his colleagues, but I could sense the lies beneath the surface. "Tom," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger, "where were you tonight?" He looked at me, his face pale and eyes wide with surprise. "I told you I was with the guys from work." I shook my head, feeling the tightness in my chest. "I checked your location. You weren't at any bar." His expression darkened, and for a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of something in his eyes. Guilt or fear, perhaps. "Why are you checking up on me?" he snapped, his voice turning sharp and defensive. "Because something is wrong," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You've been avoiding me, avoiding intimacy. And then I saw that you added Julia on Facebook. Where were you?" There was a heavy silence, the ticking of the clock punctuating the tension in the air. Finally, he sighed, shoulders slumping in resignation. "It's not what you think." "What is it then?" I demanded, my voice breaking under the weight of my emotions. "Tell me." "I met with Julia," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "We've been talking for a while, and things got complicated." My heart shattered at his confession. The truth I had feared was now laid bare before me. Julia, my best friend. My mind raced through memories of trust and laughter shared between us, now tainted by betrayal. But as he continued, my blood ran cold. "It's not just her," he confessed. "I met someone online months ago. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. It's been going on for a while." I felt as if the ground beneath me had disappeared. All the signs, the distance, the avoidance. Everything fell into place, and I was left reeling. It wasn't just one betrayal. It was a web of lies, and I had been blissfully unaware. I stood up, legs trembling beneath me, as the weight of his admission settled in my chest. "You betrayed me," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. He had shattered everything we built together. He tried to explain, to apologize, but I could not absorb his words. All I could think about was how everything had crumbled, how the man I once envisioned marrying had decimated our love. With a heavy heart, I walked out that night. I left the life we had shared behind me, unwilling to look back.